All right, Kevin, are we good to go?
We're live and rolling.
Wonderful. Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us from wherever you are in the country. It is going to be a big Friday. It's going to be a big discussion. I want to thank you all for joining us. And I especially want to thank our panelists who are here. Kevin, a special thank you to you as well, because I think this came out of a lot of your thinking about the subject. It was a great proposal, a solid idea, and Kevin is going to be not just our administrator for this, but he will be co-facilitating, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. I'd like to say hi to Colin Deval-Smith. Is she here?
Yeah, hi, Jack.
Good, thank you very much. Colin. Sharif. I know you, Sharif, had a late night last night.
Yes, a very late night. Good morning, Jack.
Louisa Kalo, is she here?
No, Louisa is not online yet.
All right, we'll come back to Louisa. We've got Shadrach. I haven't seen Shadrach in a long time. How are you, Shadrach?
Very well, very well. How are you, Jack?
Excellent, thank you very much. Wandile Nkodo, I don't know if Wandile has joined us yet.
Not yet.
Not yet, all right. Hendrik Namalili, how are you doing, Hendrik?
Oh, well, man, I'm very well, Jack. Are you good?
Excellent, thank you very much. Ramadan, has he joined us yet, Ramadan Suleiman?
No.
All right, guys, just to give you just a little bit of housekeeping before we get going, a reminder that this is a 1-hour session. We're running from 10 to 11. We actually don't have much time given how much we have to cover. We will be taking some questions later on, and I know that Kevin will be facilitating that. He's picking up the feed of a lot of the questions. So it's absolutely important to us that we are not just covering the big issues in terms of what we prepared as a panel, but it's also important for us to be responding to your important questions that are coming through. I'm going to segment the discussion for the last 15 minutes or so that we can tackle some of those questions. Also, it's very important to us that it's not just about the panel talking about these important matters. It's important that we get to know who our audience is as well. Where do you come from? What is your interest? How are you positioned in the industry itself? And what is it that you do? How are you affected? So to get to know you, we'll also be running a bit of a poll. Thank you very much. And Kevin, would you like to kick off just to explain what the poll is? Also, just to give your designation and what it is that you do. We're going to do some quick intros before we get into it.
So yes, I'm Kevin Jones. I'm the Executive Director of SACIA. We're a professional body, so our mandate specifically revolves around standards, training, and industry certification. And one of the key issues for us in running this event is to try and get a better understanding of what the issues are that are facing industry professionals. I'm just watching the poll as it runs through at this stage. So the question is, what is your employment status under pre-COVID conditions? And at this stage, about 77% of the individuals that are contributing information are freelancers by choice, 13% are full-time employees, 6% were unemployed, and 4% were in part-time employment, not necessarily happy with that situation and looking for a full-time job. So that's some interesting feedback. 76% freelancers by choice. So here is, I'm going to close that now, and that's the result. The next question that we ask, just to gather this information. So I'm going to close that poll and move on to our next poll, if nobody minds. So the next poll is what is your, okay, so sorry, there's the results of this particular poll. I think you should be able to see it.
Yeah.
Okay. Next poll going down So yeah, 77% of people voting. I'm just battling to get to the next poll question. So if you don't mind, Jack, maybe we can continue to move on while I.
Yeah, absolutely. Colin, a brief intro, please.
Hi, my name's Colin de Waal-Smit. I am the co-founder and the secretary treasurer of the South African Guild of Actors.
Thank you, Sharif.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sharif Baker, chairperson of the Technical Production Services Association of South Africa, speaking for most technical crew that are members towards the TPSA. But in this time of COVID-19, I'd like to say that I'd like to be able to speak for most of the industry, especially the freelance community.
Hendrik.
Hi, my name is Hendrik Nemariri, the director of Morangi Productions. We specialize in audio and live events. I'll be speaking on behalf of the company employers, plus mostly freelancers who are mostly at disadvantaged by this COVID-19. I want to know exactly how we can help them as an industry and how advance their cause to be able to survive this problem. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I just launched the second poll, just trying to figure out what sector people are working in. So here we are. This stage, just about 60% people working in film and television, about 28% working in technical production and live events. So that's kind of an interesting perspective for this audience. Actually, I think we're up at 275 attendees right now, and 71% of those people have voted. So quite an interesting dynamic there. I'm going to close that.
All right, let's go on now. We've got one more intro to do, and that's Shadrach. And it's useful we go into Shadrach's introduction, because my first question is for you, Shadrach. Please, would you introduce yourself first?
My name is Shadrach Mutou. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Trade Union, UASA.
Thank you very much, Shadrach. Look, just to give some context, and I think it's always an important place to start. We are right now still within the grips of the lockdown, what the lockdown has meant to us in the industry. And when I say us, I talk about the live events, film, TV, and theatre production industry. It's had a horrible impact on our income. So we have to agree that the lockdown was important for the survival, long-term survival of our industry, but also just on a simple terms of survival itself. We have to try and prevent against infection. So everybody can safely say that we have agreed to the lockdown restrictions. What it does mean, though, is that we are no longer able to earn an income. And our big concern is there any way, any mitigation of the impact on the lost income? And is there a viable strategy in order, not just for the sector to survive, but also for some kind of income relief to be made available to the freelancers in our sector? And I'd like to start this at a foundational level, which is where I'm going to bring Shadrach in. People, we can't afford to take for granted that everybody knows what a freelancer is, and essentially that our sector largely comprises freelancers. That's pretty much the way people are contracted, and that's how they're engaged in terms of the delivery of their work. Shadrach, would you mind please just starting off with a brief description of how is a freelancer defined and what makes them different from an employee?
Thank you very much, Jack. Our understanding is that a freelancer will be somebody that is self-employed, who is hired to do work for different companies on particular assignments. And this person, by agreement, will determine what income is due to them with the contracting party. But on the other hand, an employee, as we understand it from the union point of view, is that it is someone who is in a relationship with an employer. This will exclude, of course, independent contractors, who in this case will be classified as freelancers. And these employees will be salaried either daily, weekly, or monthly. This employee will be entitled to belong to a trade union. This employee will belong to a bargaining council, which is governed by labor legislations, where issues such as leave, sick leave, annual leave, etc. are determined or enshrined. That's in a nutshell our understanding between the two entities, that is employee and a freelancer.
Thank you, Shadrach. Hendrik, to you, in terms of your experience, how are people in our industry contracted in terms of the way you work and the way you deliver your work? Is there an important difference between people who are engaged as freelancers, or do you actually employ people at all?
We do have a full-time employees, but in the mains we use mostly freelancers from event to event, depending on the skill of the freelancer, obviously. But there are those freelancers that we use on a regular basis. And to be honest with you, those guys are the most hard hit currently because there's nothing coming for them and there's no even a union or any government relief for them. And for me, that is the most important thing, that how can we help them, people like Shadrach and the union, TPSA and Sakia, how can we come up with a solution to be able to see, to make sure that they have got something coming, at least some food parcel or anything that can be granted to them, because these guys are dependent on job to job. They don't have a specific income to say on a monthly basis, this is what I'm getting. If there's no event, there's nothing for them. And for me, that is about the most important thing currently. And if you listen to what people are saying around, it looks like the freelancers are the most hard hit because there's no one speaking on their behalf.
I absolutely get that. Sharif, to you, does this not remind you of a far bigger conversation taking place in our industry? Because my concern is that yes, the COVID-19 lockdown restrictions has brought something into focus. It's brought into focus the fact that freelancers will not be earning an income if they're not working, and there is no safety net. Now, my fear is that when we start looking for the solutions, the obvious solutions, the ones that would typically apply to a typical employer-employee relationship, does not necessarily apply to freelancers. And I think we've got to be really careful about where we go looking for assistance. So just take us, based on your experience, Sharif, what are the structures that are available to us, and what makes us different from the structures available to the typical employee?
Jack, obviously the foundation is if you've got a company and you employ somebody, you are covered. But we're in a unique situation, and I'm going to call a spade a spade. Our industry, whether you are an artist, an actor, a technical crew person, majority of this industry is run via freelance workforce. A skilled workforce, but a freelance workforce. And unfortunately, up until this time, we've been our own worst enemies, whereby majority of us maybe haven't registered a company, haven't registered ourselves for UIF, haven't registered ourselves for pay as you earn. And that has now come back to haunt us slightly. However, this is South Africa. We're still on a journey of democracy. 25 years is nothing in the greater scheme of things. And right now, the freelance community, which is vast in comparison to the employees that have got a set paycheck in our industry, are struggling. They are really, really struggling because there is no relief. There is no imminent or soon to be, or don't worry, we're working on it type of relief in any form whatsoever. There are various members of us in the community, whether it be TPSA, Sakya, Hendrik, Feed Our Crew, various little organizations trying to get together to get our minister to hear us on a humanitarian level, for our president to hear us on a humanitarian level. Yes, maybe we've done wrong in the past by not registering ourselves, but right now we need food. We now, the biggest challenge out of this, Jack, is that we now need to come together as a unified voice. If we're not going to come together as a unified voice, the government's going to say, now who do we listen to? Who do we speak to? When we go to Shadrach and say, Shadrach, this is the unified voice now. How can we make it work? The freelance community is something that exists. We can't just brush it under the carpet. It's something that's out there.
No, Mlandi, go back. People can see you. Go and see that.
Sorry.
Okay, I just got some feed coming through there. Sorry, you were just making a point there, Sharif.
So we need to find a way that we can work with Shadrach, where we can work with government and the Department of Labor, which I think we've initiated, and I think you can unpack that a little later on, Jack and Kevin, where we can try and find a way where we can be registered with the Department of Labor for the advantages of UIF, for the privilege of having labor protection moving forward. But that is moving forward, because I think Saga and Colin have been traveling this journey for many years, trying to establish a form of freelance recognition, whether it be via union, whether it be via bargaining council. And I applaud you all for that. And I'm so glad Shadrach is here so that he can explain it further of the journey that's been taken to get there. Right now, we need to look at today. Today, tomorrow, the immediate future of COVID-19 for every freelancer in the technical world, as well as speaking to the creative industry, musicians, artists, actors, and what have you, and how we can try and find relief immediately. I applaud our president, Jack. Sorry, I'm going to wrap up now. I applaud our president for the stimulus project that he's put out. And yes, we're thankful for any rands that come in for us to survive. But we still need to find some form of recognition for our industry. Sorry, Jack.
And I think that's exactly the point I wanted to make, because for me, it's not good enough that we have to say we are the poor little orphans of our South African economy. We cannot be relying on charity in order to say this is what we need to survive. Right now, there is an important difference, and Colin, this is what I'm going to direct to you. There is an important difference between an employee who is in employment relationship with an employer. Right now, they can go to the UIF. Right now, they can go to the Solidarity Fund. Right now, they can go to their banks. And if they've taken out a loan since October 2017 or something, they can claim credit insurance. None of those various relief efforts are available to freelancers. And I'll add to the context here. Do you remember just a few years ago, there was a group of actors in Generation. They called themselves the Generation 16. They were in a contractual dispute with the producer, and they decided that as a bunch of freelancers, they were going to go to a labor lawyer to pursue the CCMA, and they wanted to go to labor court. And we tried very hard to explain to these very well-known actors why they couldn't. But please point us, Colin, into that difference between the employee and the freelancer. Are you telling actors that right now they can go to UIF? What are they asking for? What are you telling them?
So thanks, Jack. I think this is where the understanding of your status within the industry is really vital. So if you go into a contractual relationship, which 99.9% of freelancers do, there are provisions within that that say these are the protections and this is the relationship that we have. As the Generation 16, they signed the standard freelance, SABC freelance agreement, and what that then does is it gives the terms by which you need to operate. What that means is you cannot strike. It means you cannot earn UIF, you cannot pay UIF. It means that you do not have access to the general labor provisions, like, for example, the CCMA as a dispute mechanism. Within the contracts that we are dealing with, there is mediation and arbitration as the mechanisms by which you need to deal with the dispute. So what we need to do in those situations where we have a dispute with a contracting party is we then need to go through the process of mediation and arbitration, which is a very clear process, which is open to all contractual relationships. So what happened in that specific situation was that the broadcaster basically gets the producer to produce the program. So the broadcaster is not part of the actual running day-to-day and implementation of the contract. So the producer and the actor are in the contract. The actor has a dispute. They then, what ended up happening is that they didn't go through the dispute mechanism process and therefore did not go to work. They were told that they needed to go back to work on the Monday, otherwise their contracts would be terminated because they were going through a labor process, which is not part of a contractual relationship. Their contracts were therefore terminated. So a lot of people say that the Generation 16 were fired, and that is technically not the truth. The truth is that their contracts were terminated because they were in breach of contract. And if the producer really wanted to, they could actually sue for damages, which they didn't do.
That's an important point, Colin. Can we leave that point exactly there, because I want to go to Shadrach and Kevin, who I will pose the same question. Starting with Shadrach, though, a lot of people in our industry, Shadrach, are saying if we as freelancers could just get a union going, it would be the answer to all our problems. Why are we not taking the time to explain that freelancers are not protected by the Labor Relations Act, which is the statute that empowers people to create a union representation, bargaining councils, bargaining forums, and collective bargaining as a process? What do we need to do to help people understand the difference? Please just start with that, and I'm going to ask Kevin to pick up on the same question, please.
Thank you very much. Could I take you back a little bit in terms of the point that Kalina just concluded? You know, as things stand, freelancers are vulnerable grouping. Now, my Oxford Dictionary tells me that vulnerable person is a person in need of special care, treatment, protection, and support because of neglect. That's the word I want to emphasize, neglect. Now, when you look at the current labor laws, do freelancers have protection under those laws? I do not know, but my suspicion is they do not. Is this deliberately made, or is it neglect? If it is neglect, it has got to be corrected. If it is deliberate, it's got to be challenged. But the consoling point that I have here is the following. In the light of the pronouncement by the president of the 500 billion rand stimulus package, where he has indicated that he will put aside 100 billion rand to save and create jobs. We are yet to hear the ministers unpack that statement. It will be very interesting to see how the freelancers feature in that instance. One consoling point is that the president has mentioned in his statement artists. He mentioned them by name, artists. Now, this is indicating that there's a recognition of some sort for the grouping. Now that it is coming from the president, it is a serious matter for consideration. And we will be looking with keen interest how the ministers are unpacking this. There's this statement that was made that there should be assistance to support the artists and freelancers. We yet to hear the ministers unpack that statement and illustrate to us what sort of assistance do they have for the artist. From our side, as UASA, we were ashamed, and we generously, through our NEC, made a donation to the Theatre Benevolent Fund of an amount. Now, coming back to the point of unionism, are we advocating and educating everybody the importance of belonging to a union? We can only do as far as we're doing. We continue to put a lot of energy to conscientize and sensitize all the people around us. And we are glad to be in association with SAGA, who will also assist in unpacking and unfolding this process for everybody to belong. It is important that we belong. The grouping needs to unite. We will be there to assist so that we form what you call industry forum. And that industry forum should stipulate what their needs are and present all those needs to the minister so that he can pronounce on them, publicize them, endorse them, so that they are recognized as industry-specific needs. We are at a point where we are accelerating with this matter, and I'm sure Kalen will be in a position to elaborate more on this aspect. Thank you very much.
Kevin, pick up on that, please. You've been getting requests about why don't we just form a union, as if that's now suddenly going to be the cure for all our problems. In answering that question, I wonder if you could also expand into why is it that the typical relief measures, for example, banks and insurance institutions, they don't make products available to freelancers. Why is that?
So I think there are a couple of reasons for it, but before I answer the question, I'm not sure you've been watching the attendee list. Both Ramadan and Louisa have joined our panel and are able to answer questions, and I suspect that they both have something to contribute. I know Louisa has been madly sending notes on the chat section of the program. So if you could get both of them involved, that would be great. Coming back to the question, I think that there are two answers that I want, or two angles that I want to share. The first is that, you know, to be honest, the freelancers are simply not organized. From a SACIA perspective, we've been trying to engage with freelancers for several years, perhaps for the last 4 or 5 years. You know, we convene meetings, people don't turn up. We convene meetings in locations that they ask us to convene meetings in. They still don't turn up. We reach an agreement with them to do X, Y, and Z. X, Y, and Z doesn't get done. And so I think that the issue for me is A, the legislation at the moment does not allow freelancers to form a union, and B, the freelancers themselves spend so much time fighting with each other that there is no unity. And so, you know, if they don't want to join one of the existing associations, then actually the sensible thing for them to do would be to form their own association. But they don't, or they haven't up until now. And I think that the issue for me has got more to do with organised industry. Government does not want to sit down and speak with 100 little organisations. They want to speak with an organisation that can engage on behalf of a broad industry sector. And so there are organisations that form that umbrella function. SACIA is a good example. We have 8 different chapters that fall within SACIA. SASFED is another one. A great little organisation, which is a federation of different organisations involved in the film and television industry. And so, if they don't want to join SACIA and they don't, then form your own organisation, but don't try and do everything independently. Become part of a greater whole, so that we're able to utilise the economies of scale and the power of mass communication in order to get the message out. Those are absolutely critical. But I know that both Louisa and Ramadan have comments that they would want to share on that.
Yeah, let's. I've been looking at the comments that Louisa came up with. Ramadan, just to start with you though, do you have any comments to throw in there, or can I offer you a question that I've had for you specifically?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you for this opportunity. Kevin said a mouthful about the weaknesses of the industry per se, of how the actors or artists and the crews per se who have resisted to join organization and get organized. I am in the forefront with, by being in the IPO and the recently formed IBFC as part of the journey in trying to organize specifically black producers, crews, and artists and writers per se. And there is so much resistance, and there's so much of individualism that exists, and we at times assume as black people, I'm speaking about black people, we assume that by writing a letter to the minister, it will change the industry. By writing to the president, it will change my fate in the industry. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. I have to say that COVID-19, somehow it's a blessing in disguise. And I'm saying this carefully, noting the sufferings that's going on out there by everyone in South Africa. Now, I want to come up with a solution. It's fine for us to say, let's organize and let's unionize, but we need to help government. Government does not know how to put in place legislations that can help us. And I would like to propose that since we are all paying 25% tax as artists, for me, that is a plus. I would like us to ask the Minister of Arts and Culture, together with the NFVF, to do a quick study looking at what you said, Jack, about what is happening in Australia, what is happening in Canada. And I would specifically, as per my experience, look at the French system. The French system does have a system of freelancers. They all pay tax and they are all eligible for UIF. Now, I would like us to propose that the minister does a study and look at tried and tested methods out there which can help government and help us and the Labor Department to incorporate these systems. We cannot say to government, help us, help us, help us, when we ourselves don't know how. That is my contribution. Thank you.
That's absolutely solid, and I think that's a wonderful starting point. What you are suggesting, if I hear you correctly, is to say it's useless taking a begging bowl to government unless you have a solid proposal about how policies and even statute might come to assist you in what it is that you need. Louisa, you know exactly what you need. You know what unfair exploitation means in your industry. But I also sense that not everybody agrees on what is the best way to approach this. For example, if we have to say freelancers can unite and we can regulate ourselves as a self-regulating industry, there are organizations right now, and some of them might be participating in this webinar, who have gone on record as to say that any form of industry regulation is going to chase away investment and is going to make the international producers look elsewhere. This is the reality of for me, it's the heart of why our industry will never find unity. Come in on this, please, Louisa, and explain what kind of unity are we looking for if we know already that there are producers that are willing to exploit the fact that we will not be regulated. I'm not hearing Louisa. All right, Sharif, would you like to go with that?
Sorry, yeah, I'd like to expand on that and on what everybody has said, especially Ramadan. We have, and I said this, I think, at a webinar yesterday, our president has boldly said, and all due respect to people that are suffering COVID-19, but we've got a brilliant opportunity to wipe the slate clean. And if the president is prepared to do that for a country, our industry should be following suit and doing the exact same thing. Wipe the slate clean and unify. Whether we are an IBO, a IBSS, a USASA, a SASCOC, whatever the case may be, become organized. But more importantly, become organized and associated with a professional association and a body. Right now, SACIA is the association to be joined with and holding hands with, where we can speak together as one voice, so that the government and the ministers will then listen to a recognized professional association that is holding hands with everybody that is organized in unity. To that, right now, conversations have been happening that, okay, for COVID-19, can we create a command council, put a command council together from the various sectors that are being recognized, so that we can go to government, so that, because we've already missed out on the 150 million rand that DAC put on the table, whether it went to sports people or not, I don't know, but it definitely didn't come to technical crew, and I don't think it came to artists and actors. So now we've got 500 billion rand on the table, and like Shadrach said, 100 billion is now going to the freelance community and the likes thereof. But if we are not going to be stand up and noted, we're not even going to get that 100 billion or access to that 100 billion. So the time is now to clean the slate, stand together, be united with organized structures. Let's leave the word union out for now. We will travel that road. Shadrach will help us there. Carol Lynn will help us there to travel that road, how we can do it. And I think, Jack, we started something in December with the Department of Labor and put out feelers so that we can tell them, listen, we exist. We are freelancers. Please help us. How do we do it? Yeah. And that ball is rolling. But that ball is going to roll in a year's time. I need a loaf of bread tomorrow.
Yeah, I hear you. And, you know, I think I'd like to tackle two elements with the 20 minutes we have left. The first element is, do we qualify? What kind of assistance do we qualify for now? And I saw that there was some effort to put together a command council. My fear with another command council is that this is where we now get used to creating structures within structures within structures, when all structures that we could ever need are actually already in place. Are they working? Or have we created a system of serialized administrators who are sitting and paying themselves money to achieve nothing, but all they have is a title, and for them it gives them this massive ego to walk around with that seems to satisfy them in industry circles. We cannot afford to play that game. Where is the money? Are we giving it to the most vulnerable? The structures to give it to them are already there. And it's on that point that I just want to come to you, Hendrik. I also want Colin to weigh in on this. I absolutely get Sharif's point about this is the time where we get to wipe the slate clean. This is the time where we can create the industry unity that we are looking for. I maintain my point. There are people who make huge money from the profits they get by exploiting vulnerable people, by exploiting vulnerable workers, by exploiting those crew who are the least likely to go into an argument over a contract. So help me out here, Hendrik. What do we need to do for those people who do not have the power, the people who are working of day wages? They're the ones who are most exploited. What are the chances of us being able to get them into an organization?
Like Sharif has said, it's been a ball rolling with lots of smaller and I call them smaller and groups of people who want to create their own smaller and empire within an empire that is already existing. And it's detrimental to the people who are suffering on a daily basis, because those guys, they don't have a voice to be heard. They follow every little thing that comes along their way because they don't know where to go and how to follow these things. Tomorrow I come up with a smaller organization that says Hendrik's organization, Sharif comes with his own, they follow. So at the end of the day, these people are vulnerable because their income is based on what's going to happen after if they don't follow Hendrik after this COVID-19, he's not going to give me a job. If they don't follow Jack, he's not going to give me a job. So they are most vulnerable because they have got no voice. The only important thing that we need to do now is to put them in one basket. Like Sharif said, let's clean the slate. Let's make sure that the slate is clean, start all over again. There are lots of already, Mr. Shadrach, or there's organizations that are already working. Why can't we put everything in one basket and say, we are representing the least of them all? The guy who comes and pick up the trash in the morning when it's very cold, those guys are voiceless at the moment. Anything that can help them, they will just follow because they don't know. The labor laws are not protecting them. No union representative is talking on their behalf. Like you are saying, Jack, people are just sitting with a lot of titles and having a lot of money that was supposed to be given to the freelancers, but they're not giving it to them because they know no one is going to come and challenge them. No one is going to come and talk on their behalf. And that's the biggest challenge that we are facing. I don't know what Kellen think about it, but for me, these are the most people that we should be worried more about. And you make sure that they are joining these unions, they are joining this group, even if it's not a union, whatever we can call it, as long as these people are represented in some form, so that the money that the government is giving, they'll be able to get something out of it. That's my take.
Excellent. Hendrik, Colin, coming to you quickly. The Minister of Arts and Culture announced on the 25th of March his strategy to bring income relief. He made a point about, I will give financial assistance to those people who can prove that their production that they were supposed to earn on was cancelled. The deadline for that was on the 6th of April. 10 days later, the minister then creates an adjudication panel to receive all the applications. I have a very quick question for you, Colin. Have any of your artists received any financial benefit from the Department of Arts and Culture?
No.
All right, thank you. Yes, let's just take it back further. In November last year, the Minister of Employment and Labour, Thulas Nxesi, said, I want to help all you freelancers out there who are so vulnerable. And I want to expand the scope of labor laws so that I will deem you to be employees for the purposes of very specific areas, very specific provisions of labor law. And that's going to, number one, give you some form of protection, but I'm not going to change the way you contract. Keep your freedom. You are a freelancer, maintain that. You claim your expenses back from SARS, fantastic. Keep that. I just want to give you protection. Now, Saga has made a submission. The deadline was in February, I remember. What were some of those things that was in the submission to the Department of Employment and Labor? What are you asking for? How is it going to help?
So I think the fact that the Department of Labor actually has come to the industry and recognizes that there are vulnerable people, I think is a huge step in the right direction. I think there may be some misguidance with regards to the provisions that they have mentioned in terms of our industry, because I don't necessarily think that all of them are workable. So part of what Saga did is to point out that, you know, maternity leave, if you're a freelancer and working on a voiceover here and 4 days on a TV series there, is not necessarily something that is possible. What Saga has put forward is to look at some kind of regulation so that a self-regulation within the industry is possible, that we determine what it is that we need within the industry, but that there are provisions within that labor can protect us. For example, is there a way that we could potentially pay UIF, be protected, and therefore in this COVID-19 kind of situation, we would be eligible for some kind of payout through UIF? Just as one example, the bulk and the basis on which our submission was sent through is looking at some kind of industry forum. There is obviously, as you mentioned previously, Jack, there is pushback given the fact that I think the biggest point I want to make with this is that there is such an imbalance of power within our industry. We have the producers and broadcasters who hold the cards, and they determine what the terms are under which we are contracted, and the minions have to just comply. The moment that somebody stands up and says, I don't agree with that, they go, okay, we'll use somebody else. So the concern that I have is that because we have such a power imbalance, if we come together as an industry within a forum that is regulated and dealt with in a professional manner, everybody's voice can be heard. We can have agreements that are balanced, where all parties are protected. We know that the earnings of people is not going to be based on the 3.5 cents that they think that we are worth, but rather that there is something that says, this is the range of the kind of professionals that we are representing within the forum, be they crew, be they makeup, be they wardrobe, be they grips, be they sparks, be they DOPs, be they actors, background artists, etc. So that we have the entire industry to come together to be able to create the self-regulation that actually works for the industry. Let the industry decide what the industry needs, rather than us being told potentially by government who doesn't understand our industry on how things need to work. So one of the things I just wanted to mention also is that the president mentioning that they will be open to submissions in terms of how we as the various industries can put forward submissions in order to tell them how things potentially could work for industries. And I think it is a prime opportunity as an industry, not as individual and yana little organizations, but as an industry to come together to say, this is what we feel will work.
I like that. I know Sharif wants something to add there. Before we go to Sharif, Kevin, I want to come to you after Sharif. Would you mind reflecting on your experience at NEDLAC with the engagement with the Department of Employment and Labor, and what your overall feeling was, and do you think that is a viable way forward? Also, if there is resistance to the idea, where is it coming from and why? But first to Sharif.
Mine is very quick, and Colin, I thank you very much for all the effort that you're putting in thus far. One of the biggest questions on the tips of the tongues of the freelancer is pay scale regulation. Why can't we put that into play, and can we put it into play, and what has happened in the past? And I think, Jack, you mentioned something yesterday with regards to this, and if we can unpack that here quickly or just reply to that, that would be awesome before we segue into Kevin.
I think Kevin also has a very clear idea of why that's It is a serious issue. I wonder if you wouldn't mind addressing that point as well, Kevin.
Yeah, no, I can do both. So first off, the Department of Labour meeting at NEDLAC. So I think that there are, Colin, I know Saga supported the proposed changes to the Labour Relations Act, as did Sakya. Our submissions were slightly different, but for all practical purposes, they were essentially the same. And I think that there were two challenges that we experienced. The first is that there were a number of employer bodies that saw these changes as a threat to them in the marketplace. And so they were opposed to the introduction of these changes, and I think opposed to the detriment of the freelance community. And I think the second is that there was a great deal of uncertainty amongst other industry bodies about the implications of what this might mean. So I know that certainly there were a number of industry associations that solicited adverse reaction from the freelance community by sharing information that was quite simply untrue, and stirring up a pot that was toxic because it served their own interests to do so. But I think that we have continued our engagement with the Department of Labour. We had representatives from the Department of Labour on the webinar that we hosted yesterday, and I believe that it is important that we bring about these changes in the market. Are there negative consequences for employers? Some small and insignificant ones from my perspective. Are there real benefits for the freelance community? Absolutely. So I think that the organisations that are opposed to this bill are misguided. I also want to just pick up on the question about rates of pay. So rates of pay, freelancers at the moment are deemed to be independent contractors. In terms of the Competitions Act, collusion between independent contractors is illegal. Individuals that are engaged in collusion are deemed to be involved in anti-competitive behaviour. They can be, they are absolutely engaging in what is called a cartel. Engaging in cartel activities, engaging in anti-competitive behaviour is against the law. If behaviour, they can be held accountable, so much so that members of associations. Okay. I have a feeling that this may be Louis' conversation. I'm just going to mute your mic. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anybody that engages in this kind of behaviour is subject to prosecution, and in fact, the penalties for this kind of behaviour include a jail term. So it's kind of a serious challenge if you engage in anti-competitive behaviour and you try to establish pay scales. The consequences are real, and there are many instances where the Competitions Act has been enforced, and organisations that have tried to set pay scales have been wrapped over the knuckles and instructed to eliminate those. So Shadrach may have more information, or perhaps Ramadan has some insight there. But the reality is that it is simply, not only is it against the Labour Relations Act, it's against the Competitions Act, and there are serious consequences for trying to set a rate of pay for freelancers. So that's very important to understand the difference. Again, we started off by talking about the difference between employed individuals and freelancers, and we defined that 77% of this audience were freelancers. For that 77%, it is against the law to establish pay scales for a job.
That's perfectly put, and Saga was in exactly that position for publishing suggested minimum rates for actors. And in fact, the Competition Commission screening unit contacted us and said, you've got to remove that, or if we if we persist, we will be investigated, brought before the commission, and even as a non-profit organization, the result of being penalized by the Competition Commission is that our members, our individual members, could be fined 10% of their annual turnover, which is incredible. And that is simply because amongst different agencies that have been talking about rates, involving actor agencies and other organizations that have been talking about this for close to 20 years. As a result of that process, there were suggested minimum rates that were published. In terms of the Competition Commission, that is anti-competitive behavior. So we've got to be really careful about talking about what our rates. We have 4 minutes left. Very quickly, I would like to connect with Ramadan, asking him, what is your idea of what self-regulation means in the industry? And when you're done with that, Shadrach, I hope you can round it all off for us by explaining the benefits of collective bargaining. First to Ramadan.
Personally, being in the industry for the past 25 years and 30 years in total, and having experienced the French system, all that is being mentioned here about anti-competitiveness and so forth, it's not new. These kinds of things exist out there. All we need to do, again, I'm repeating myself here, is to find out what is happening out there and see how we can help the Competition Commission and so forth, help them with understanding our industry. Now, the issue of self-regulation, I don't think I am pessimistic, because for 22 years, we couldn't achieve bringing the industry together, whether it be it actors or whether it be DOPs, gaffers, and so forth. And I have concluded that maybe a way forward, 2-3 things, is to speak to the Minister of Communication, whereby we say to the SABC, we have to start somewhere. Start with a national broadcaster who does not commission or contract, be it producers or be it artists, without them having a condition to say they must belong to some entity. Begin with government, because government is there to protect the vulnerable. Go to the Minister of Arts and Culture, Sports, Arts and Culture, and say to Natim Tetwa, because he himself is fed up by artists coming individually to say to him, can we have this, can we have this? They themselves, using Natim Tetwa as the minister, to also come up with mechanisms that stops people speaking to him individually, and he must be able to help industry and force whatever regulations that we are coming up with to say, you go to your entity, you go to your association, let them be the ones to come to us and speak to us. Lastly,
regulation, yeah. I want to give the last minute to Shadrach. You can wrap up with this point, Ramadan.
Lastly, there's the NFVF. We need to lobby the NFVF to also support the self-regulatory mechanisms by they themselves, by saying to whoever applies for funding at the NFVF must belong to whatever organizations of your choice. Do not come here as an individual. You must have a number. You must be a member of this and this organization. So that is my solution to self-regulation.
Thank you. Shadrach, the benefits of collective bargaining.
Yes, very quickly, let me start here. The November meeting that you spoke about, it looks like the outcome has not been realized. Maybe we need to sensitize the minister, persuade him to trigger in the UIF Act which also allows him to recognize other categories of people to be contributors. The minister is empowered by this act. He must just issue a notice to say, I, Minister so-and-so, deem the following category as contributors to UIF. And then we can take it from there. Now, in terms of the last point you raised, my summary is we have to unite and come up with what we call industry forum. Set industry standards with all role players. Request the minister to publicize all those standards as industry conditions, and then we can take it from there.
Solid proposals. Everybody, it's just past 11 o'clock. I want to thank you for your participation, to the panel, for all your contributions. I know there were lots of contributions being made. Louisa, also, I'm sorry we didn't get to you, to see you. I did see some of your points. There were very important ones that needed to be made. And I'm hoping, Kevin, if you get the idea again, please can we have another engagement like this? I think we left it on a point where we could have serious proposals going forward that everybody will agree with.
Yep. So I think number one, this webinar has been recorded. We'll post it on various social media platforms. I'll make it available as widely as we possibly can. You know, I think that this was our biggest webinar ever. We had more than we had almost 900 people that registered. Unfortunately, only 330 arrived. But guess what? That's the biggest webinar that we have ever presented. I think it's the biggest industry meeting that has ever taken place. So, you know, I think it's great that we have this relationship between Saga and Sakya that allows us to collaborate with each other. And next time, let's see if we can get more people involved and have even more people participating in this discussion. It's important to keep the dialogue going. That's absolutely the key. So, yeah. Thanks to everybody that listened, and cheerio.
Thanks to the audience. Thanks to the panel. Everyone logging off.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.